In 2005, during a small church mission trip over Easter weekend, a teenage girl named Emily Harper was said to have joined a volunteer group headed into the Colorado mountains. But when the trip ended, she never came home, and no one seemed to notice. Naturally, nearly 2 decades later, her mother received an anonymous message that unraveled everything they thought they knew about that weekend. The morning of March 27, 2005, started with a low mist crawling over the Rockies, cloaking the small Colorado town of Bright Hollow in a veil of fog. It was Easter Sunday, and despite the solemn chill in the air, the First Light Baptist Church was buzzing with youthful energy. The annual mission retreat, organized for high school volunteers, had drawn nearly 24 teenagers from Denver and surrounding areas. They were there to repaint aging homes, serve meals at the local shelter, and, most of all, spend the holiday in service, not in selfies, as their group leader, Thomas Fields, liked to say. Among them was Emily Harper, a shy but quick-witted 16-year-old with a quiet kind of confidence. Her mother, Martha, had kissed her goodbye at the bus station just 2 nights before, watching as her daughter climbed aboard, waving with a bright smile and a backpack full of hand-leg toiletries. It had taken some convincing. Martha was hesitant about letting Emily go unsupervised, but Emily insisted. "I need to do something real this year, Mom," she had said. "Something that matters." By the second evening of the trip, the group had already scraped and primed 2 houses and distributed Easter baskets to several families. Spirits were high, but Emily seemed distracted, according to 2 of the girls who shared a bunk room with her. She got a phone call late, one of them recalled later. After that, she just wasn't the same. On the morning of the 3rd day, she didn't show up for breakfast. At first, no one panicked. Teens overslept all the time, especially after long work days. But when Emily didn't join the others at the shelter kitchen, Thomas reportedly checked her room and returned to breakfast with a shrug. "She must have headed home early," he told the group casually. "Said she wasn't feeling it, caught the early bus." No drama. That explanation might have stuck, except no one remembered seeing Emily at the bus depot. No one had walked her there, and none of the chaperones recalled signing a release form. When Martha called the church that afternoon to say she hadn't heard from her daughter, Thomas was the one who picked up. He sounded calm. "Oh, she left this morning," he said. "She said she needed to go home." Everything seemed fine. Martha's stomach sank. "Left? What do you mean?" "She didn't come home." There was a long pause on the other end. I'm sure there's a misunderstanding," Thomas stammered. "Maybe she's staying with a friend?" But Emily hadn't taken her charger, or her makeup, or the 3 homemade cards she'd brought for the Easter Kids craft event. Her things were still in her bunk when church staff checked. The local police opened a missing person report that same night. The first 24 hours brought a flurry of activity. Interviews with the teens, volunteers canvassing the town, Martha driving 3 hours through the dark to arrive in Bright Hollow and walk the same streets her daughter had supposedly tread just hours before. But the longer the search went on, the stranger it became. No one in the group could agree on the last time they saw Emily. Some said she was with them during the late-night prayers. Others swore she skipped them. A few thought she went to the back porch with Thomas after dinner. But no one could place her clearly. No time-stamped photos showed her after Saturday evening. No one remembered her exact outfit. Not one of the dozens of group selfies included her. It was like she had faded from the trip without a trace. A convenience store clerk said a girl who might have looked like Emily had bought a bottle of water just before sunrise. But there were no cameras in the area, and the description was vague at best. A teenage girl in a hoodie, light hair, I think, who walked toward the East Highway. Could have been anyone. The official narrative solidified slowly. Emily Harper, 16, left the mission trip early of her own accord and vanished en route home. Her disappearances classified as a voluntary absence for the first month until Martha produced evidence that her daughter's bank account hadn't been touched. Her phone remained off, and she never arrived at the Denver bus terminal. 2 weeks later, Thomas gave a short statement at the church podium, offering prayers for Emily's safe return. "She was a bright spirit," he said, reading stiffly from a paper. "We hope she finds her way home." But behind closed doors, Martha felt stonewalled. The church offered sympathy but little cooperation. Thomas, once responsive, stopped returning her calls. The sheriff's office in Bright Hollow, underfunded and overstretched, assigned one junior detective to the case. There was no video footage, no confirmed sightings, and no clear timeline. The media moved on. So did the mission group. Only Martha didn't. Every spring she returned to Bright Hollow on the anniversary of Emily's disappearances. She pinned posters on telephone poles, asked shopkeepers the same tired questions, and sat for hours near the shelter where her daughter was last seen. She spoke to whoever would listen, reporters, bloggers, podcasters, even a retired FBI agent who now ran a true crime YouTube channel. Most offered sympathy. Some promised to look into it. None got very far, because in the eyes of the world, Emily Harper had simply chosen to disappear. But for Martha, that was never an option. Her daughter hadn't vanished. She had been erased, and 17 years later, she was still looking for the moment it began. It wasn't until spring of the following year, 2006, that Martha finally returned to the place where the paperwork had first begun, the administrative office of First Light Baptist Church. With grief calcified into determination and a file folder nearly bursting with notes, receipts, and names, she stepped into the narrow corridor behind the main chapel and introduced herself to the young receptionist, who barely looked old enough to have finished high school. "I need to see your volunteer coordinator files from March 2005, Martha said calmly but firmly, placing a copy of Emily's mission fee payment on the desk like a badge. The girl blinked, unsure, before disappearing behind the frosted glass door with the name Pastor Jonathan Klein printed in delicate gold script. A few minutes later, the pastor himself appeared, gray-suited, with kind eyes and a cautious smile. He welcomed Martha into his office with the practiced warmth of someone who'd counseled hundreds of families through grief. But his expression shifted subtly as she laid out her request again. "Ma'am," he said, brows furrowing, "I wasn't the head pastor back in 2005. That was Reverend Norris, and he retired in H10. Sure, but I'll be happy to check the archived records with you." She followed him to a back room, dusty and lined with old metal filing cabinets. Each drawer was labeled by year, by event. The pastor unlocked the drawer marked Youth Missions 2005, pulling out several thick folders, registration forms, travel itineraries, health waivers, and staff notes. He handed one to Martha. This should be the Bright Hollow trip. She flipped through each form with a dry-mouthed intensity, 22 names. She read each one twice. Emily's wasn't among them, not as a participant, not on the roster of assigned rooms, not even as a last-minute addition. But Martha had the check, carbon copy, in her hand, a payment of $185.00, made out to First Light Baptist Youth Missions. The date matched. So did the memo line, Emily Harper /Easter 5 trip. She showed it to the pastor. "This was cashed on March 15, 10 days before the bus left. You can see your account deposit stamp on the back." He took it, examined it, and nodded slowly. "This is our bank," he admitted, "and that looks like one of our stamps, but—" He trailed off, turning back to the folder. "She's not in here." "Could someone have removed her?" Martha asked, voice tight. "Or added her later, maybe manually?" Pastor Klein hesitated. "In theory, yes, but there'd usually be a paper trail, emergency contact info, something." He pulled a different folder from the back. "These are expense sheets. Sometimes they list additional costs per child. Maybe we'll find something there." Page after page listed gas receipts, meal invoices, and room bookings. On one, scribbled in the margins, was a name: E. Harper, snack reimbursement, $12.50. It was the first mention of Emily in any internal document. Martha felt a surge of cold recognition. "This is her." "That's my daughter." Klein took the paper, squinting at the faint pencil mark. "That's something," he admitted. "Oh, and let me reach out to the person who oversaw logistics that year. She still volunteers here sometimes. Her name's Marcia Dean." Martha waited in the office lounge for nearly an hour. When the receptionist returned, she had a post-it note in her hand. "Miss Dean says she vaguely remembers an Emily joining," she recited. "She thinks someone made arrangements directly with Thomas Fields. There may not have been a formal registration." That name again, Thomas Fields. The group leader who'd told Martha over the phone that Emily hadn't felt it and left on her own. The same man who stopped responding once Martha started asking detailed questions. The pastor gave Martha his direct number and promised to follow up personally with Marcia, but as she walked out of the church building into the cold spring wind, she no longer expected answers to come from within its walls. That night she opened her laptop and searched for Thomas Fields. His name had once been attached to dozens of youth events, church drives, and community blogs. Now it had gone mostly dark. His old personal site redirected to a domain for sale page. His listed contact email bounced back, undelivered. But Martha was relentless. Through a cached page of a local high school newsletter, she found a link to a now dormant social media profile. A blurry photo, a tagline, "Service builds character," and a handful of connections. One of them led her to a former mission attendee, a girl named Natalie Jenkins, now working in Oregon. Martha messaged her late into the night, careful and measured. "Hello, I'm Emily Harper's mother. You were on the Bright Hollow trip in 2005. I'd like to ask a few questions about that weekend." The reply didn't come until morning. "I remember Emily, but I thought, wasn't she just visiting for a day or something? I didn't realize she was part of the group." Martha stared at the screen, her breath catching. "Not part of the group, not even counted." "Did she stay overnight with the rest of you?" she typed. "I'm not sure," Natalie replied. "She wasn't in our cabin. I think she stayed in the old parish house, the one Thomas was using." The parish house? A standalone guest structure behind the main church, not typically used for youth lodging. Martha's fingers trembled over the keyboard. "Did you ever see her leave?" The 3 dots blinked and stopped. No answer came. At 11:14 a.m., the message thread disappeared. Natalie had blocked her. Martha sat back, the silence in her living room now deafening. Emily's name wasn't in any official file. She had no assigned bed, no liability waiver, no photograph, but someone had cashed the check. Someone had marked E. Harper on a receipt, and someone had watched her vanish. Martha opened a new document and began a list titled People Who Knew. She wrote 3 names: Thomas Fields, Marcia Dean, Natalie Jenkins. Below it she added a 4th, whoever was behind that snack reimbursement line. Then, almost as an afterthought, she circled Thomas's name twice, because if he had arranged her daughter's unofficial presence, then maybe he had also erased her official absence. The hallway light flickered above her. Outside, wind chimes clinked against the porch railing, and deep inside Martha's gut, the sense of something deliberate began to crystallize. Not neglect, not coincidence, but intention. She picked up the church's number again, this time dialing a different extension. "Hi," she said when some answered on a guest house. "You had in March 2005? There was a pause, followed by a hesitant voice. "You mean the old parish house? It hasn't been used in years. Why?" Martha's voice was steady. "Because I think someone stayed there," she said. "Someone who was never supposed to be forgotten." 2 weeks after her last phone call with the church, Martha sat in the back booth of a quiet suburban coffee shop on the outskirts of Aurora, Colorado, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea and watching the door. She hadn't seen Cassie Rourke in nearly 15 years, not since Emily's funeral-less disappearance had shattered everything normal about her life. But when she messaged Cassie through an old alumni group on Facebook, the reply had come faster than expected. "I still think about her," Cassie wrote. "I'll meet you." When the door finally swung open, Martha barely recognized the woman who walked in. Cassie looked older, sharper, her hair cut into a no-nonsense bob, and her cardigan replaced by a dark leather jacket. But as she slid into the booth and pulled off her gloves, there was still something about the nervous twist of her mouth that reminded Martha of the teenager who used to sleep over in Emily's room every Friday night. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Martha said quietly. Cassie gave a half shrug. "I wasn't sure either." They sat in silence for a moment before Martha placed a faded photo on the table, the one of Emily in front of their house, wearing the purple scarf Cassie had given her for her birthday. "Do you remember the week before the trip?" she asked. "Did she say anything strange?" Cassie stared at the picture, then nodded slowly. She was excited, kind of jittery, but also nervous. She looked up. "She told me she was going up a day early." Martha's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She said Thomas texted her. Cassie replied, "Like, on his own." He told her there'd be prep work, stuff that needed to be done ahead of time. She thought it meant he trusted her, that maybe she'd get to help lead. He texted her directly, Cassie nodded. She showed me the message. It was something like, "Need extra hands Thursday, don't tell the group yet, surprise." She thought it was cool, special. Martha gripped the edge of the table. Why didn't you say anything back then? I thought she was being dramatic, Cassie said, eyes falling. I figured the group left Friday, so what did one day matter? And after she vanished, I thought maybe I'd misheard. Martha exhaled slowly, her fingers trembling against the rim of her cup. No one ever mentioned she arrived early. No paperwork, no photos, nothing. Cassie reached into her purse and pulled out a worn notebook. I found this cleaning out my mom's attic last week. It's from high school. Me and Em used to pass it back and forth in class. She opened to a page near the back. In handwriting Martha recognized instantly, Emily had written, "Thomas says I can be part of the core team. Just me and him Thursday night. Big chance. Wish Cassie was coming too." It was dated March 23, 2005, 2 days before the others left. "That's the night before they were scheduled to depart," Martha said. "It means she was already on the road by then." Cassie nodded. "I know." Martha took the notebook with both hands, feeling the weight of her daughter's words press into her palms like something solid. After Cassie left, she sat in the booth a long time, rereading that single entry until the ink seemed to blur into the paper. That night, she dug through her records again and found the name of the church's volunteer transportation coordinator for 2005, Alan Tierney, a retired mechanic who had offered his van for long trips. A quick online search pulled up a current address. The next morning, she knocked on the door of a modest ranch-style house on the edge of town, the porch cluttered with garden tools and a stack of old tires. Alan opened it slowly, wearing a flannel shirt and a look of mild confusion. "You don't know me," Martha said, "but I believe you drove for First Light Baptist during the 2005 Easter trip. I'm Emily Harper's mother." His face changed in an instant, surprise, recognition, then wariness. "The girl that went missing," he said softly. "Yeah, I remember." "Do you remember if she traveled with the group?" Martha asked. "That's just it," Alan replied, stepping aside to let her in. "She didn't." They sat at his kitchen table, sunlight catching the dust on a row of hanging mugs. "I got a call from Thomas," Alan began. "Said he needed to head up early with one kid to prep supplies. Asked if I could do a quick run Thursday night. I didn't think anything of it, just another favor." "Emily?" "Yeah," he nodded. She was quiet. Got in the van around 7, had one backpack. Thomas met us at the church and rode up front. He talked the whole time. She barely said a word. "Where did you drop them?" "Bright Hollow," Alan said. "We pulled up behind the church. Thomas had a key to the old parish house. Told me they'd be staying there till the rest arrived." Martha leaned in. "Did you see Emily again after that?" Alan shook his head. "I went back to Denver the same night. Didn't think about it until the story broke." "Did anyone else know she went early?" "Not officially," Alan said. "Thomas asked me to keep it low-key, said the staff would handle check-ins Friday. I figured it was organized." Martha stared at her hands. "Why didn't you come forward?" "I didn't know it mattered," he admitted. "By the time her name was all over the news, they were saying she left the group." "I thought maybe she ran off on her own." "She didn't," Martha whispered. "She never even made it onto the group roster. No one recorded her as present." Alan rubbed his jaw. "Then you've got a bigger problem than I thought." Martha nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, "and I think Thomas knew that from the start." She left Alan's house with her heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place, each one revealing how deeply unrecorded Emily's presence had been, intentionally so. The early arrival, the solo transport, the handwritten note, the lack of photos or documents. It was all too clean, too curated, and as Martha drove east along the same highway her daughter had taken that night, she could feel the narrative cracking open at the seams, revealing the quiet outline of something worse, something deliberate. She picked up her phone and opened her notes app, scrolling to the list she had begun days earlier. She added 2 new names, Cassie Rourke, Alan Tierney. Below them she typed a single phrase in bold, Thursday night track point. Then, without hesitation, she hit call on the one number she had promised herself she would never dial again. Detective Sarah Bellman, the original investigator on Emily's case. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. By the time Detective Sarah Bellman called back, Martha had already compiled a spreadsheet of everyone involved in the 2005 Easter mission: volunteers, staff, drivers, meal prep workers, even janitorial hires. She spoke with Sarah for 40 minutes, measured, factual, but with an urgency that pressed through every word. Sarah, now retired but consulting part-time for cold case reviews, agreed to meet the next morning. They chose a quiet corner table at a diner near the courthouse. Sarah looked older but alert, eyes sharp under silver-framed glasses. "I remember the case," she said before sitting down. "But by the time I got it, everything was already cooled over. No evidence, no solid witnesses, and frankly, no support from the church." Martha slid over the notebook entry from Emily, the transportation confirmation from Alan, and a printout of Cassie's testimony. "You were working under the assumption Emily vanished after being registered and housed with the group," she said safely. "But she was never officially recorded. No one even knew she was there, except Thomas." Sarah leaned forward. "You're telling me she was brought in separately and housed off-site, in the parish house, alone, with Thomas?" Sarah inhaled slowly. "That's true. That changes everything." Martha hesitated. "There's something else. I've been digging into Thomas's timeline. 2 weeks after Emily disappeared, he resigned from First Light." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember that coming up in his interview." "Because there's no resignation letter in the church files," Martha said. "No exit paperwork, his staff email was deleted, and his name doesn't appear in any newsletters after April 2005. "That's not just sloppy," Sarah said. "That's intentional." Martha nodded. "I tracked down a former office assistant from the church, Clara Mendez. She remembers seeing a shredding bin full of documents labeled TF program plans the week after Easter. When she asked the new youth coordinator what happened, he just said, 'Thomas left for personal reasons.'" Sarah scribbled notes. "Did Clara mention anything else?" "Yes," Martha said. "She told me about a man named Leo Brantley. He used to do janitorial work at the church during that same period. She said he'd sometimes be assigned to the back storage areas." Sarah tapped her pen. "Still local?" "According to Facebook, yes. He runs a small handyman service in Aurora." They found Leo the next day, fixing a screen door on a duplex near the train tracks. He was in his 60s now, wiry and soft-spoken, with paint splatters on his jeans and a nicotine rasp in his voice. "Emily Harper?" he asked when shown the photo. "Yeah, I remember her. Pretty girl, real quiet. She was with that Thomas guy." "Did you see them together?" Sarah asked. "Only once," Leo said. "Maybe twice, but the time I can't forget? That night behind the rec hall. The warehouse-style shed they used to keep extra supplies, paint buckets, tools, that kind of thing." "What happened?" Merritt asked. Leo leaned on his broom handle, staring out past them like pulling the memory from deep water. "It was late, maybe 9:30. I was cleaning out mop heads when I heard yelling. Like, who was yelling? Thomas. And someone else. A girl. I never saw her clearly, but her voice cracked, like she was crying but trying to stand her ground." "What did you hear?" Sarah asked gently. Leo's voice lowered. "You promised," she said, real sharp. Then something like, "You said I'd be safe," and he, Thomas, he said, "You don't understand what's at stake." That stuck with me. "Then what?" Then it went quiet. Door slammed. I didn't see anyone leave, but the next day I went to clean out the shed, and it was locked. Stayed locked for months. Martha's mouth went dry. "Did you tell anyone?" Leo laughed bitterly. "I tried. Told Clara. She said, 'Leave it alone.' I needed the job." Sarah took down everything, methodically. "This shed," she asked, "it's still there?" "Last time I drove by, yeah, but they don't use it anymore. Painted it over, added a sign for storage renovation. Looks fancy now. Would you be willing to sign a statement?" Sarah asked. Leah hesitated. "I'll tell what I know, but you better watch your back with those church folks. They protect their own." That evening, Sarah filed a supplemental report under a reopened internal case number. Though officially in vacuum, she flagged the entry with a coded alert to Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Meanwhile, Martha returned home and pulled up archived pages from First Light's website circa 2005, recovered through a public digital archive tool. She located a Team Spotlight article featuring Thomas Fields, dated March 10, just weeks before Emily's trip. In the post, he's smiling, arms crossed, before a bulletin board titled, "Easter Mission, Bright Hollow Prep." The caption reads, "Excited to lead our most intimate retreat yet. Hand-picked volunteers, special focus, flexible structure." Below the photo was a list of core volunteers, names now familiar from Martha's spreadsheet. Emily's name, of course, was not there, but neither was another one she expected to see, Rachel Marks, the second in command listed in previous rosters. Curious, she searched Rachel's name and found a local news article from 2006. It mentioned Rachel had filed a workplace complaint in April of 2005 against a matter had been resolved quietly through mediation. The article didn't name Thomas, but the timeline aligned too perfectly. Martha printed it out, highlighted the date, and added it to her case binder. Then she looked again at the photo of Thomas from that mission article. His smile looked different now, forced, cornered. And in the upper left corner of the image, half obscured behind a prayer calendar, was something odd. What appeared to be a second door in the parish house hallway, one she didn't remember seeing on her visit months earlier. A service entry, a closet, or something else entirely. She zoomed in. The resolution was poor, but her gut told her it mattered. She added a new tab to her case folder. At the bottom, she wrote a question in capital letters. Why was he alone with her? Her phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Martha," she said. "You might want to hear this. I just pulled Thomas's personnel record from a sealed backup. Not only did he leave abruptly, he was flagged for inappropriate communication with a minor 6 months prior. The church handled it internally. No report was filed, but there's a record that the senior pastor, Reverend Norris, was advised to monitor all further interactions. That pastor retired the same month Thomas resigned." Martha stared at the floor, feeling the air thicken around her. "So they knew," she whispered. "Someone knew, and they let him lead a trip." 2 days after Sarah's revelation about the internal church warning, Martha sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by printouts and sticky notes arranged like a crime scene mural. She had highlighted every reference to Thomas Fields in old newsletters, social posts, meeting minutes, even a cash staff directory from 2005, which still listed his cell phone number and personal email, both long inactive. Frustrated, she began cross-referencing church staff with no nonprofit affiliations, searching public tax filings and staff bios on various outreach program websites. It was a long shot, but the moment she saw the face, she knew. The hair was shorter, and he had added glasses, but there was no mistaking the sharp chin and overly practiced smile. On the About Us page for a small nonprofit called Step Up Youth Foundation, based out of Des Moines, Iowa, a man named Tom R. Faulkner was listed as program director with a glowing paragraph about his 2 decades of faith-based youth work across multiple states. Martha's hands trembled as she scrolled down the page. It included quotes from teens, photos of smiling volunteers, and a biography that conveniently started in 2006, with no mention of Denver, no mention of First Light Baptist Church, and certainly no mention of Emily. She opened an online people search engine, entered his new name, and ran a full background report. The result was chilling in its blankness. Tom R. Faulkner had no criminal record, a perfectly clean credit profile, and a suspiciously empty early career history. Almost like he'd been born in 2006. Martha called Sarah, who promised to quietly forward the information to her contacts at the Iowa Attorney General's office for verification. Meanwhile, Martha posted discreet inquiries in old mission trip alumni groups under a pseudonym, asking if anyone remembered Thomas Fields, and if they had noticed anything odd during his leadership. That night, a message came through from someone named Erica Mason. "I've been waiting years for someone to ask," the message read. Erica was living in Portland now, teaching at a public high school and raising 2 daughters. They agreed to a video call the next morning. "I was 16 in 2005, Erica began, "same group as Emily. I didn't know her well, but I remembered Thomas. Too well." Martha listened in silence as Erica recounted how Thomas had begun messaging certain students late at night, offering extra leadership opportunities and asking them to arrive before or stay after scheduled events. At the time, we thought it was cool, Erica said, like we were being noticed, trusted. But there were rumors, quiet ones, about him taking girls aside for check-ins or giving them private rides. Did anyone ever report it? Martha asked. Erica nodded grimly. Not to police, but one girl, I think her name was Carla, told her mom. The mom went to the church and there was a meeting. After that, Thomas seemed different, more careful, but the behavior didn't stop. Do you know if the church did anything formal? I heard he was given a warning, not written up, just spoken to. They made him take a sensitivity training course, but nothing was ever shared with us. Martha took notes feverishly. Do you remember a girl being pulled aside right before that Bright Hollow trip? Erica frowned, thinking. I remember Thomas talking about an advance team, just one person though. He said she was mature for her age and would help prep materials. He sounded proud. I never saw her, but I always wondered if it was someone he'd chosen for other reasons. Martha felt bile rise in her throat. He brought Emily up a day early, she said. She never made it onto the group list, never returned home. Erica looked devastated. I'm so sorry. I thought he was creepy, but I never imagined. You were kids, Martha said softly. It wasn't your job to see what the adults were hiding. After ending the call, Martha returned to the Step Up Youth Foundation site. She looked through their calendar and noticed an upcoming public event, a community open house, scheduled for the following Friday. It was open to donors, families, and prospective volunteers. Without hesitation, she booked a one-way ticket to Des Moines. She didn't tell Sarah, didn't post on social media. She just packed a folder of documents and a photo of Emily and left a note on her kitchen table. When she arrived in Iowa, the city was flat and cold, the wind slicing through her coat as she made her way to the community center listed on the flyer. It was a modern building with glass walls and a mural of children's handprints on the east side. Inside, volunteers bustled with activity, setting up tables, baskers, and murals. She recognized him instantly. He wore a navy fleece with the Step Up logo embroidered on the chest, a lanyard around his neck, and the same self-assured gait that Martha remembered from the grainy group video Sarah had shown her years ago. Thomas, or rather Tom Faulkner, was standing by the refreshment table, laughing with a young couple. Martha's breath caught. She took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and walked straight toward him. Tom, she said. He turned, smile fixed, eyes scanning her face for recognition. Can I help you? You don't remember me? She asked. Should I? Emily Harper's mother, she said. His face didn't change, not a flicker. I'm sorry, he said. That name doesn't ring a bell. Martha stepped closer, her voice low. March 2005, the parish house. Do you remember now? His smile faltered for the briefest second, but then returned. Ma'am, I think you may be mistaken. I've worked with hundreds of young people over the years. So many, she said softly, that you can't remember the one who never came back? Excuse me, he said, backing away. I need to check on something. But as he turned, Martha pulled a small recorder from her coat pocket and pressed play. It was Leo Brantley's voice, scratchy but clear. You said I'd be safe, she was crying. You don't understand what's at stake, said he said. Thomas froze. For 1 second, his shoulders stiffened. Then he walked off quickly, disappearing into the staff corridor behind the welcome desk. A young volunteer stepped in front of Martha, asking if she needed help. But she didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the hallway door, because in that moment she didn't need him to confess. She had seen what she came for. Not guilt, not panic, but recognition. And behind it, something else. Calculation. She stepped back into the crowd and took out her phone. Her hand was steady now. She opened the recorder again and tapped save. Then she sent it directly to Sarah, attaching the address and time-stamped photo of the man who had once been called Thomas Fields. 3 days after returning from Iowa, Martha found herself once again sitting in the cramped basement archives of First Light Baptist Church, only this time she wasn't alone. After forwarding the audio recording of her confrontation with Tom Faulkner to Sarah, the former detective had quietly looped in a contact from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation who was reviewing cold cases. The official stance remained sufficient cause for criminal reopening, but privately, the tone had shifted. "He looks can't move yet," Sarah told her over the phone, "but they're watching him now. You bought us time." Martha used that time to revisit the church's oldest members, those who had been around long before the turnover in leadership, the ones who remembered faces, not just names. One name kept coming up: Helen Brewer, a longtime parishioner who ran the church's unofficial photo bulletin board for decades. Now 84 and legally blind in one eye, Helen still lived across the street from the chapel in a white bungalow lined with bird feeders. Martha knocked on her door with a mix of hope and dread. Helen opened slowly, but smiled when she heard Emily's name. "I remember that girl," she said, voice trembling. "Quiet, sweet smile. She brought me a tin of ginger cookies the day they arrived." "You saw her?" Martha asked, heart quickening. "I thought no one did." "Oh, I saw her," Helen said. "She helped me carry hymnals. Said she was on some early team, just her and the leader, Tom, I think." Helen invited her inside and pulled out a dusty binder. Labeled Easter 2005. Inside were dozens of printed photographs, faded but still legible, mostly of volunteers painting fences, playing guitar, praying in circles. As Martha flipped through, one photo near the back made her heart stop. It was poorly framed, tilted and partially obscured by a finger, but in the lower corner, cut off by the camera's edge, was a young girl with long brown hair, crouching to tie her shoe near a supply table. She wore a lavender sweatshirt. Her profile was only partially visible, but Martha knew from the slant of her nose, the curve of her jaw. "That's Emily," she whispered. Helen squinted. "Can't say for sure with these old eyes, but I remember the sweater. She wore it that day, said it was her mom's in college." Martha scanned the photo and saved a digital copy. "Do you know who took this?" "I think it was Rachel. She had a cheap Kodak back then, left it on a timer by accident a lot." Rachel Marks, the same assistant who filed a complaint just weeks later, another thread, another missing piece. Later that night, Martha dug deeper into Rachel's history. After the church mediation in 2005, she had moved to Minnesota and worked briefly for a youth advocacy nonprofit before disappearing from public records. A private search revealed she had changed her last name after marriage, now Rachel Anders. Living in St. Paul, Mara sent a short message through LinkedIn. "I believe you witnessed something in 2005 involving Emily Harper. I'm her mother. Please, I don't need a confession, just the truth." The next morning, Rachel replied, "Meet me in person," she wrote. "I'll talk, but no messages. They monitor too much." Meanwhile, Sarah had uncovered a trove of internal emails from the church's archive server, which, while not publicly available, had been stored in off-site backups. One flagged thread was dated May 2, 2005, 2 weeks after Emily disappeared. The sender was Reverend Norris. The subject line read, "E.H. Incident Sensitive." The message, short but damning, read, "The incident involving E should be kept confidential to avoid affecting this year's program. All parties involved have been reminded. Focus should now shift to the June event. Do not discuss further via email." Below it was an internal note from a staff member. "Understood. Files locked. Discussion ended. We'll handle remaining documentation offline." Martha printed the email and stared at the lines for a long time. The language wasn't frantic or uncertain. It was treated as tragedy. It was treated as tragedy. She brought the email to Helen the next day. The old woman read it slowly, her finger guiding each line. "This isn't shock," Helen said. "It's shielding. They were protecting someone, not the child." Back home, Martha laid out the photo next to the email. On one hand, a fuzzy image of a girl not meant to be in the frame. On the other, confirmation from within that the church knew. She thought back to the interview with Leo, to Erica's story, to the moment Thomas had turned his face in Iowa and registered her presence like a weight he thought he had buried. The cover-up wasn't one moment. It was a series of choices. Each person had seen something, ignored something, signed something, and now all of them had moved on. But the silence had a shape, and in that shape, Emily was still missing. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in March 2024, nearly 19 years to the day since Emily disappeared, when Martha received the envelope. It arrived without a return address, postmarked from within Colorado, and inside was a single slip of paper, typed, unsigned, and folded twice. The message was brief. If you want to know why she never came home, check room 6 of the old parish guest house. The key still works. Don't wait. Martha read it 5 times before picking up her phone. She called Sarah, but it went to voicemail. She debated contacting the local police, but instinct told her that whatever waited behind that door had been left specifically for her, and that involving too many hands might erase it before she ever got close. By noon she was on the road, heading west toward Bright Hollow, the clouds above the Rockies thick with the threat of late snow. When she arrived at the old parish house behind First Light Baptist Church, the building looked as abandoned as she remembered: faded siding, boarded windows, and weeds curling around the base of the porch. But the front door wasn't nailed shut. It creaked open with the same tired groan, and the hallway beyond smelled of dust, mildew, and faint traces of old wood polish. She walked quietly past the common room and found herself facing a row of numbered doors. Room 6 was at the end of the hall, its doorknob slightly tarnished but intact. With one last look behind her, Martha turned it. The door opened. Inside, the room was dim and cold, the curtains drawn tight. A single bed frame without a mattress sat crooked in the center, and in the far corner, beside an old coat rack, stood a battered wooden filing cabinet. Maris stepped toward it, heart pounding. The drawers were jammed but not locked. On her third tug, the top drawer gave way with a sharp metallic click. Inside were dozens of folders, most empty or filled with scraps, old volunteer rosters, faded maintenance logs, utility bills. But near the back, in a file marked Cole, and crossed out by the 2,000 folders, metillably marked M.E.A. Harper. Her breath caught. She pulled it out with trembling fingers and opened it carefully on the dusty desk. Inside were 3 pages. The first was a standard intake form from a local walk-in clinic, Bright Hollow Family Medical. Patient name, Emily Harper. Date, March 25, 2005. Under the meaning for visit, someone had written nausea, disorientation, fainting. The second page was a physician's note with diagnostic shorthand Martha didn't fully understand, but several terms jumped out at her: elevated pulse, signs of distress, advice further observation. Then she saw the rubber-stamped mark in red ink across the page: Invenuver VFI visit. The final page was a clinic memo, unsigned, stating that this patient, a rubber-stamped mark in counteract, in slanted vision, and was not billed. Record retained for liability only. At the bottom, someone had written, in thick black pen, no follow-up necessary, TIF request. Martha's hands shook as she reread the pages. TF, Thomas Fields. The implication was immediate and sickening. Emily had been taken to a clinic, alone, and the visit had been dismissed as unofficial. The symptoms described didn't match a simple flu or exhaustion. They suggested trauma. Panic. A medical emergency swept under a rug. She photographed each page, backed up the images to cloud storage, and carefully returned the folder to her bag. Then, near the back of the cabinet, she noticed a loose panel. Curious, she reached inside. Her fingers brushed a soft object wrapped in cloth. She pulled it out slowly. It was a journal, unmarked, battered, the kind handed out at mission retreats. The front page was torn, but the next was intact. The handwriting was unmistakable. Emily. March 24, 2005. I didn't expect to be alone. Thomas said there'd be a prep team, but it's just me. He said the others had car trouble. I don't like the parish house. It smells like mold. He brought dinner, said to keep the door locked at night. I miss Mom. March 25, 2005. Woke up dizzy. Head hurt. Couldn't remember what time I fell asleep. He said maybe it's nerves. Took me to the clinic after I almost threw up during breakfast. Didn't let me talk to the doctor much. Stayed in the room the whole time. Said it was for insurance. March 26, 2005. He knocked really late. Said he forgot to tell me something. I didn't open the door. He tried the knob, but left when I said I was writing. I didn't sleep. I heard noises downstairs, footsteps, but I thought we were alone. The entries stopped there. Martha closed the journal gently, her breath shallow. Emily had been writing everything. But someone, Thomas, had made sure it never left that room. She placed the journal in her bag, zipped it shut, and stood still in the middle of the room, listening to the wind outside whistle through the cracked window frame. Whatever happened in room 6 wasn't just a moment of neglect. It was a sequence, deliberate and hidden. The medical records, the journal, the invalidated diagnosis, it all pointed to one conclusion. Emily tried to tell someone, and someone made sure no one listened. Back outside, the air felt sharper, the sky low with the promise of sleet. She walked straight to her car, locked the doors, and called Sarah. This time, Sarah picked up on the first ring. "I found something," Martha said, her voice quiet but steady. "Tell me everything," Sarah replied. "Tell me everything," Sarah replied. Martha did, slowly and carefully, detailing every line in the folder and each entry in the journal. There was a long pause when she finished. "I think we have enough," Sarah said, "for a formal investigation." Martha looked back at the building one last time, its crooked frame now a place where everything had finally started to come undone. The morning after uncovering the journal and the invalid medical file, Martha stood in front of the low brick building that once housed the Bright Hollow Family Medical Clinic. Now partially converted into a dental supply office, it still bore the original signage in faded T letters. With the scanned documents clutched in a folder against her chest, she pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. A bell chimed overhead. A young receptionist glanced up, mildly confused. "We're only taking dental equipment appointments today," she said. Martha nodded politely. "I'm not here for that. I'm looking for someone who might have worked here around March 2005, specifically in general care, not dentally." The receptionist hesitated. That was before the merger. "I don't think anyone from that team is still—" "Wait, maybe Carla? She comes in Tuesdays for bookkeeping." "Hang on." The girl disappeared into the back office, and a few minutes later, a woman in her late 50s with graying hair and a worn blue cardigan stepped out, wiping her hands on a paper towel. "I'm Carla. You said 2005? Martha stepped forward and handed her a printed copy of the intake form with Emily's name. Carla stared at it, her brows pulling together in slow recognition. "I remember this girl," she said finally. "She came in late in the day, looked pale, dazed. Do you remember who brought her in?" Martha asked. "A man, mid-30s, tall, clean-cut, wore a church fleece. He said he was her legal guardian for the trip, told us she was just nervous, said she had stage fright or something, but I didn't believe that." Martha leaned forward. "Why not?" Carla's voice lowered. "Because she wouldn't look at him, and when I asked her to describe what was wrong, she paused like she didn't know how to speak. Then she whispered, 'I'm dizzy. I think something's wrong.' But the man cut her off, said she was just tired from travel." Martha felt her hands clench involuntarily. "Did you try to speak with her alone?" Carla nodded. "I asked if he could wait outside while we ran a quick vitals check. He said he had to stay with her for insurance compliance. I didn't like it. Something felt off, so I made a note of it in the logbook." "Do you still have that logbook?" Carla hesitated. Summer meeting, he touched it, quickly flipped to the next section. "Matt, I saved a few entries, the final month before we transitioned to the new system, just in case there were any liability issues." She disappeared into the back again, returning with a weathered maroon ledger. She flipped carefully through its pages, stopping at March 25, 2005. Running her finger down a column, she paused, then pointed him. "Here, patient Emily Harper, arrival 4:17 p.m., guardian T. Fields, authorized temporary," and under notes, "Patient shows signs of acute anxiety, dilated pupils, jumpy response to touch, no physical injuries reported, patient reluctant to speak, guardian refuses peace or mental health referral. State's issue is faith. Stress." Mary stared at the entry, barely breathing. "It also says," Carla continued, "do not contact authorities per guardian's directive. Treatment provided, basic hydration, short observation, dismissed without follow-up." "Did you ever try to follow up?" Martha asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I did," Carla said. "I called the number he gave, the church main line. They told me she was back with her group, doing fine, and to stop asking. After that, I let it go." Martha exhaled shakily. "She never came home. She disappeared the next day." Carla's eyes widened. We thought she was fine. I had no idea." Martha gently placed Emily's journal on the table, open to the entry about the clinic visit. "She wrote about it," she said. "She remembered you." Carla touched the page like it was something fragile. "I should have done more," she whispered. "We all should have." "Would you be willing to make a statement?" Carla looked up, her eyes full of something between guilt and resolve. "Yes," she said, "if it helps bring her back, if it makes someone finally take this seriously." That afternoon, Martha sent scanned copies of the logbook entry, the intake form, and a transcript of Carla's account to Sarah. Within hours, Sarah called her back, her voice tense with urgency. "This is enough," she said. Chastised Thomas Faulkner to a medical visit with signs of distress, a refusal to involve authorities, and now corroboration from a third party. "We can formally reopen the case." Martha sat in silence, her heart thudding. "There's something else," Sarah added. He checked the church's board meeting notes from that spring. There's no mention of Emily, but there is a brief discussion recorded in a finance meeting, April 3, 2005. It references a line item, Emergency Discretionary Fund, Parish Housing Repairs. The amount, nearly $2,700, 0 cents. That's what it says. But there's no invoice, no receipt, just a note. Post-retreat, sanitation and disposal. Martha closed her eyes. The words were antiseptic, clinical, but their weight was devastating. She reopened the scanned clinic entry, her eyes locked on one sentence, "Do not contact authorities per guardian's directive." Emily had reached out, and every system around her, medical, religious, administrative, had chosen silence. Martha stood up slowly, the folder now heavier than when she entered. Outside, the clouds had begun to shift, casting beams of filtered sunlight through the trees that lined the parking lot. She looked up, not for hope, but for clarity. Someone had known, someone had watched it happen, and someone had helped ensure that Emily Harper vanished without a sound. Less than a week after Carla's testimony and the rediscovery of the internal clinic log, Martha found herself sitting across from attorney Natalie Quinn, a civil litigation specialist known for her work on institutional abuse cases involving minors. They met at a quiet firm tucked behind a Denver library, where the walls were lined with cases of sealed files and precedent-seeing judgments. Martha came armed with everything: the journal entries, scanned clinic records, Leo's account, Eric's email, the hidden email from the pastor, and the image of Emily partially captured in Helen Brewer's photo. Natalie, methodical and composed, reviewed every page in silence, nodding only occasionally. "You have something solid here," she finally said. "It's not just negligence, it's concealment. The civil angle gives us room to pressure the church and affiliated parties to release sealed documents, and once we get discovery, if there's anything else hidden, we'll find it." "What about Thomas Faulkner?" Martha asked. "We'll name him in the civil suit as a key figure. The goal isn't only restitution, it's disclosure. If we can prove the church acted to suppress the truth or shield someone accused of misconduct, the state will have to respond." Over the next 3 weeks, Natalie filed a formal complaint with the Colorado District Court on behalf of Martha Harper, citing institutional misconduct, wrongful concealment, and obstruction in the handling of a missing minor during a 2005 youth mission. The defendants listed were First Light Baptist Church, the affiliated Bright Hollow Mission, and Thomas Fields, currently operating under the name Tom Faulkner. The complaint was supported by affidavits from Carla, Leo, and Martha, along with corroborating documentation authenticated by the now-retired detective Sarah Bellman. The lawsuit made the local news within days. "Mother opens a 2005 missing youth case. Elijah's church cover-up," read one headline. Interviews remained off the record, but the tone in the press began to shift. Suddenly, Emily wasn't just a long-lost child. She was a symbol of what happens when silence protects the wrong people. By June 2024, the court issued a ruling. The case met the threshold for review, and an order was granted for limited discovery. The church was forced to release internal documents from 2005, including employment records, financial transactions, and email chains previously withheld. Among them was a sealed disciplinary report dated October 2004, a formal internal notice against Thomas Fields with youth volunteers. The document had been signed by Reverend Norris and filed with the note external reporting necessary. Monitor and restrict unsupervised interaction moving forward. This document, combined with the medical visit log and Thomas's post-incident resignation, formed a timeline so precise it could no longer be ignored. 2 months later, in August 2024, a federal subpoena was issued to compel Thomas Faulkner to appear for deposition in Denver. The subpoena listed as cause or misrepresentation in nonprofit service application and obstruction in relation to a minor's medical incident under falsified guardianship. The public learned of the summons through a formal court bulletin posted online. Within hours, Martha's phone lit up with messages, journalists requesting comment, supporters offering solidarity, and old acquaintances expressing shock and disbelief. But Martha said nothing publicly. She knew this was only the beginning. When the day of the deposition arrived, Thomas entered the courthouse flanked by 2 attorneys. He wore a gray suit and dark-rimmed glasses, a face scrubbed clean of the polished charm he once wielded in church halls and youth centers. Martha watched him from across the atrium, her hands folded, her gaze unwavering. Inside the closed session, Thomas was asked to clarify his involvement in the 2005 Bright Hollow mission. He claimed he had no recollection of individual participants beyond official registrants and no reason to believe anyone arrived outside of coordinated logistics. Then the clinic intake form was presented. He hesitated. "That visit may have occurred," he said finally, "but if so, I was under the impression it was routine and that the young person was accounted for." "You listed yourself as guardian," the attorney said. "That would constitute legal responsibility. Why was no report made?" Church policy at the time directed us to minimize external intervention for non-emergencies. I followed protocol. "Do you deny that Emily Harper stayed with you alone in the parish house the night before the official trip began?" Thomas looked up. "I don't remember her being alone. If she was, it was only temporary." But his responses began to flay under the pressure. He contradicted dates, confused names, and when shown Emily's journal, particularly the entry about the clinic, he went silent for nearly a full minute. Outside, the court stenographer's transcript recorded that silence as no one passes to Stampscaday, though the deposition wasn't televised. Excerpts released through public records painted a damning portrait. A man who could no longer control the narrative, a man cornered by memory and fact. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, there was a record on the books that Thomas Fields, alias Tom Faulkner, had failed in his duty of care, misrepresented his role, and withheld information in the disappearance of a minor under his watch. During the second day of deposition, under direct questioning and facing the mounting weight of documentary evidence, Thomas Fields broke. With horror, which had remained firm for hours, cracked on a simple question: was there ever a moment during the trip when Emily Harper was no longer under your supervision? He hesitated, exhaled, and muttered, "Yes." The room froze. The attorney leaned forward, stared at the table. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. She was struggling. She got upset after the clinic. She didn't want to go back to the parish house. Said she didn't feel safe there." I panicked. I didn't want to involve the church leadership. "I called someone." "Who?" the lawyer asked sharply. "A friend, someone I knew from another mission. He worked with troubled youth. I thought he could calm her down, take her somewhere she'd feel heard." "What was his name?" "I didn't ask," Thomas admitted, voice barely audible. "I didn't want to know. He said he'd take her for the weekend and then bring her back to the group when she was ready. She never came back." "And you didn't report that?" "I told Reverend Norris," Thomas said. "He told me it was better to let it rest, that she might have run away, that we couldn't afford a scandal." The silence in the deposition chamber was deafening. The confession made headlines by the evening. It wasn't closure, it wasn't even an apology, but it was, for the first time in 19 years, a statement that acknowledged what had truly happened. Emily had not vanished into thin air. She had been handed off, intentionally, carelessly, and no one had looked for her. The day after the confession, a representative from the Arizona Justice Assistance Network contacted Martha. Their team specialized in long-term identification cases and had followed the reopened Harper investigation through internal channels. "There's something you need to see," the representative said. Case from 2006. Female, approximately 16 or 17 at the time of discovery. No ID, found wandering near Flagstaff, temporary memory loss, signs of trauma. She was admitted under the name Dane Doe, 2006. H. Heredith. Martha's breath caught. Where is she now? She's stable now, lives under an assumed identity in Tucson, but we've always wondered about her origins. When your case reopened, we cross-referenced DNA from her intake profile with your daughter's archived medical file. The result was a 99.7% match. For a moment, Martha couldn't speak. Tears welled, her mind refusing to believe what her ears had just heard. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Positive," the representative replied. "Would you like to meet her?" The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Travel arrangements were made quietly, without media attention. When Martha arrived at the center in Tucson, she was ushered into a modest room with soft lighting and large windows. A young woman sat at a table by the window, sketching in a spiral notebook. She had long brown hair pulled into a braid, a familiar tilt to her posture. The staff member cleared her throat. "Emily," she said gently, "there's someone here to see you." The girl turned slowly. Her eyes met Martha's, and for a heartbeat, the world stopped. No flash of recognition, no sudden embrace, just a stillness, and then a whisper. "Do I know you?" Martha stepped closer, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mother." Emily blinked, confused. I don't remember," she said softly. "But you feel familiar." Martha knelt beside her, took her hand. "You don't have to remember right now. You're safe. That's all that matters." Over the following days, with the help of trauma counselors, Emily began to piece together fragments of memory, bits of her journal, flashes of the parish house, the clinic room, the voice of a man she didn't know. She remembered running. She remembered waking up on a bus with no idea where she was going. She remembered a man leaving her at a shelter and disappearing. The records filled in the rest. She'd been found dehydrated and confused, believed to be a runaway, but too disoriented to provide clear answers. She'd never been matched to any open case, until now. A formal legal motion was filed to re-establish her identity. The name Emily Harper was restored. News of the match swept the country, sparking debates about institutional negligence, the failure of child protective systems, and the need for reform in missing persons protocols. But for Martha, the noise didn't matter. Her daughter was alive, scarred, changed, uncertain, but alive. They spent weeks together, relearning each other, rebuilding the quiet bond severed nearly 2 decades earlier. Emily was wary at first, but over time she began to ask questions, to explore photos from childhood, to sit with Martha in silence as memories returned in fragments. And one evening she opened the journal Martha had kept safe for all those years. "I remember writing this," she said. "I was scared. I wanted to go home." "You're home now," Martha whispered. In the aftermath, legal proceedings against Thomas Fields continued. Though the statute of limitations limited criminal prosecution for some charges, he was found liable in civil court for gross negligence and intentional concealment. The church issued a public statement of regret, removed Reverend Norris's name from honorary listings, and established a fund for survivors of institutional abuse. But none of it could undo the years lost. What remained was a truth finally spoken, a wound finally named, and a life once buried beneath silence now brought back into the light. Martha and Emily moved to a small town near Boulder where no one knew their story unless they chose to tell it. And on the first Easter they spent together, they visited a park near the mountains where Emily, now 27, sat beneath a tree and drew the shape of the sky. She turned to Martha and smiled. "I still don't remember everything," she said, "but I remember love, and that's a start." Martha took her hand. "That's enough." In that quiet between wind and sun, their story, no longer a mystery, became something else entirely. A testament to endurance, to truth, and to the power of not giving up. Not after a year, not after 10, not even after 19. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real-life mysteries uncovered after years of silence. What part of Emily's journey left the biggest impression on you, and where in the world are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments we read every single one.